Imagine watching 3 Roman legions vanish into the mist of a forest, leaving no trace behind, and with them the illusion of Rome's invincibility. The Teutoburg massacre was not just a military defeat. It was a psychological shock that made the greatest empire on earth waver before its enemies. If you have ever felt the impact of a loss that shakes everything around you, you will understand what Rome experienced at that moment. An empire that seemed indestructible was brought to its knees, and everyone wanted to know, how does one rise again after such a deep humiliation? In this video, you will follow every step of the Roman revenge, get an inside look at the strategy, and understand how this epic counterattack transformed pain into glory, forever redefining Rome's power. But before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and don't forget to hit the bell. That way, you won't miss any of our videos filled with historical curiosities about ancient Rome and other empires of the past. Are you ready to understand how a simple report of defeat shook the greatest empire on earth? Then hold your breath, because we are approaching the moment when Rome learned of its greatest humiliation. The news that shook Rome. The news traveled across kilometers of Roman roads, crossing valleys and forests until it reached the ears of Emperor Augustus. Weary messengers covered in dust entered the capital not to bring a tale of military glory, but to report an unimaginable disaster. 3 entire Roman legions had been massacred in Germania. It was as if the pride of the empire had been struck right in the heart. The shock was so great that many believed it to be a malicious rumor or an exaggeration. Augustus, accustomed to constant triumphs and expansions, felt a tightening in his soul upon confirming that Publius Quinctilius Varus, his trusted general, had fallen. Not only that, the legion's standards, sacred symbols of Roman presence, were now in the hands of Germanic tribes. The capital was plunged into an atmosphere of fear, and the people wondered, if 3 legions have fallen, who can stop this seemingly invincible enemy? Rome, which prided itself on its order and discipline, plunged into temporary chaos. Some feared that barbarian hordes might appear at the city gates at any moment. Augustus, usually firm and strategic, isolated himself in his chambers, repeating the famous phrase, "Varus, return my legions." It was a sign that the psychological battle had also begun, and the Roman spirit had suffered a deep blow. But if you think Rome succumbed to despair, you're very mistaken. Soon after the initial shock, a powerful engine of revenge began to move. The empire's reaction. Even in the midst of pain, the Roman Empire was not built by people who gave up easily. The Senate met in urgent sessions, and Augustus devised plans to contain the Germanic threat. Fortresses along the borders were reinforced, supply routes reorganized, and new waves of soldiers were recruited. The idea was clear: Rome was wounded, but far from dead. Tiberius, Augustus's adopted son and one of the most experienced generals, was called upon to take control of the Rhine region. The objective? To contain any advance by Germanic tribes beyond this crucial line of defense. Determined and cautious, Tiberius led reinforced battle-hardened troops, men already accustomed to the harshness of combat. They set out with an almost tangible feeling of vengeance, eager to restore Rome's honor with the sweat and, if necessary, the blood of the enemies. Inside Rome, fear, curiously enough, began to transform into hope. The people wanted answers. They yearned for exemplary punishment and the restoration of the legion's honor. While Augustus battled his own frustration, Tiberius marched toward the frontier, his mind already set on a retaliation that would go down in history. And Arminius, the man who dared to challenge the greatest empire in the world, was about to face the full might of Rome. Do you believe that the enemy might fall apart at the height of victory? Wait, because tensions among the tribes that triumphed at Teutoburg were beginning to surface, and that would change the whole game. Divisions among the Germans. The news of the victory over the 3 Roman legions spread quickly among the Germanic tribes. Everyone revered Arminius as a hero who dared to stand up to Rome and emerge victorious. However, the prosperity that quickly followed also revealed deep fissures within the tribes themselves. Some, more cautious, did not want to continue challenging the greatest empire in the world for fear of devastating reprisals. Moreover, leaders such as Segestes, a Germanic noble, considered pro-Rome, voiced their disagreement with Arminius's policies. For Segestes, confronting Rome so directly could bring a devastating retaliation, risking the annihilation of everything the tribes had conquered. On the other hand, some saw in Arminius a unique chance to break free from the Roman yoke once and for all, without ever having to pay tributes or obey the empire's laws again. Internal discord grew as Tiberius gathered his legions. Whispers of betrayal, revenge, and secret pacts began to permeate the Germanic knights. What was once a strong union against a common enemy was now turning into a puzzle of distinct interests. And that would be Tiberius's great advantage, exploiting internal flaws to subdue the enemy. Do you think Rome would be content with merely strengthening its defenses? The counterattack was on its way. Get ready to see how Tiberius took the first steps toward a revenge that Rome would never forget. Tiberius in command, preparing the revenge. Tiberius, with his stern posture and vigilant gaze, had barely set foot in Germanic territory when he launched a series of reconnaissance and intimidation campaigns. At every small Roman fortress that still withstood on the other side of the Rhine, he reinforced garrisons, secured supplies, and made it clear with new orders there would be no truce for those who defied the empire's honor. The legions accompanying him were composed of veterans from past wars, soldiers who knew the harshness of the Germanic climate and understood the strength of their adversaries. The intensive training at the headquarters along the Rhine involved ambush simulations, night marches, and strict instructions on how to deal with muddy terrain and dense forests. Everything was aimed at ensuring that a disaster like Teutoburg would never happen again. Meanwhile, within Germanic territories, smaller tribes already felt the weight of the Roman presence. Some surrendered or fled even before a direct confrontation, preferring to negotiate their submission rather than face the brute force of the legions. Tiberius was not yet launching an all-out attack, but every move was calculated to undermine the enemy's cohesion and set the stage for the definitive blow. But if you think Tiberius' command would proceed without incident, you are mistaken. Something grand was about to happen, a shift in Rome's military leadership that would change the course of the war. The arrival of Germanicus. While Tiberius consolidated positions, Augustus grew increasingly debilitated in Rome. Fearing a power vacuum, he called Tiberius back to secure the imperial transition. In Tiberius's place, the command was handed over to Germanicus, a young general of only 29 years, already respected for his tactical intelligence and exceptional charisma. His surname, Germanicus, spoke volumes about what destiny had in store for him. Germanicus arrived in the Rhine region determined to restore the lost honor, not only for Rome, but for all the legionaries who had fallen and whose memories still lingered in the muddy fields of Teutoburg. He brought renewed energy to the troops, who were inspired by his vigor and the intense way he led each offensive. There was an almost religious feeling among the soldiers, convinced that Germanicus would live up to his name and avenge the defeated legions. And speaking of honor and inspiration, this is a great moment for you to show your support. Leave your like if you're excited about this story, so we can keep bringing fascinating accounts like this one. Now, let's move forward. Germanicus was about to etch his name into the history of Rome. Could the memory of the Teutoburg massacre still weigh on the hearts of the Romans? Stay tuned. As Germanicus marches deep into the forest, old ghosts begin to resurface. Back to Teutoburg. As soon as Germanicus arrived, he devised a plan to enter the gloomy Teutoburg Forest once again. There, the legions found the remnants of that tragic clash. Scattered bones, shattered pieces of armor, and traces of destroyed camps. Many soldiers were deeply shaken, as if they could hear the echoes of the cries of their comrades who never returned. But that moment of reverence also served as emotional fuel. Germanicus ordered that the bones be buried with military honors, and that the old roots be purified to pave the way for a new chapter of bravery. For the Germanic tribes, seeing the Romans return to the very sites of their defeat seemed like a challenge, almost an insult, as if to say, "We are here, and we will not fall again." Arminius, aware of Germanicus's advance, began plotting another ambush. However, he did not count on the renewed moral strength of the Romans, now led by a commander who had studied every detail of the enemy. The forest, once the stage for a Germanic triumph, was becoming the epicenter of the Roman comeback, the air thick with the tension of an impending confrontation. But how can one wage a decisive battle if the enemy refuses to show itself openly? Discover now the cunning of Germanicus in forcing Arminius to fight in the open field. The strategy for the confrontation. Germanicus knew that the Germanic tribes were masters of ambushes, knowing every trail and exploiting the terrain to launch surprises. To force a direct confrontation, he decided to adopt a tactic of provoking the enemy. He burned hostile villages, destroyed crops, and captured some lesser influential leaders to send challenging messages to Arminius. The message was clear: show yourself and fight like a true warrior. Gradually, the provocations worked. Arminius could not allow the Romans to advance unpunished, and his embattled tribal coalition demanded a response. Even in the face of internal disagreements among the barbarians, the prospect of an enemy destroying their lands united the tribes, at least momentarily, under a common feeling of revolt. The Germanic leader gathered strong men, eager to repeat the feat of Teutoburg. Meanwhile, the Roman legions trained in their typical battle formations. The cohesion of the shield, testudo, the effectiveness of the pilum, thrown spear, and the shock power of the gladius. With morale elevated by Germanicus's presence, the legionaries believed that this time they would be ready for any attack. The stage was almost set for the confrontation that would decide the fate of both sides. If you think the battlefield would be just another fight, get ready to witness one of the most intense battles in this story, where honor and revenge merge. The decisive battle, Ídis of Visurgis. The moment everyone had feared yet longed for had arrived. The open confrontation between Germanicus's forces and Arminius's Germanic coalition. Near the Visurgis River, the armies lined up. On one side, the Romans formed impenetrable shield lines. On the other, Germanic warriors roared tribal chants, striking their own shields as a sign of defiance. The air seemed electric, charged with adrenaline. The clash was brutal. Spears flew from both sides, and every Roman advance was met with arrows and axes. Arminius, although cunning, noticed that the discipline of the legions made it difficult for him to spread panic. Germanicus, on the other hand, coordinated surgical attacks, leading the cavalry to flank the Germanic troops. The casualties were heavy on both sides, but the military experience of the Romans began to prevail. As the dust settled, victory tilted in Rome's favor. Arminius was wounded, forced to retreat, and many of his allies were captured or killed. The sight of the still-standing Roman standards and the echo of shouts of Rome in the field sealed that day's fate. The Battle of Ídis of Visurgis would go down in history as proof that no matter how much Rome bled, it would always rebound with overwhelming force. Could Rome, after this triumph, now consider itself avenged? Follow the triumphant return of Germanicus and discover the atmosphere that swept over the empire. The return and triumph of Germanicus. With Arminius in retreat and the Germanic tribes fragmented, Germanicus led his legions back, not as fugitives, but as victors. The journey back to the Rhine was different from that gloomy march to Teutoburg. Now, there were victory songs, recovered Roman standards, and a renewed pride. Every soldier felt part of something grand, as if they were correcting a historical wrong. Upon arriving in Rome, Germanicus was received as a true hero. There were crowns of flowers, applause echoing through the streets, and a renewed sense of confidence in the empire. The Senate granted him honors and organized a triumph, one of the greatest celebrations the capital had ever witnessed. The crowd filled the main avenues, watching the parade of captured Germanic prisoners and the spoils of war. Behind this festivity, however, lay a political message. An empire can suffer painful blows but will never succumb. Germanicus not only avenged Teutoburg, but he also restored Roman self-esteem. And Augustus, even in his final years, could see the glory of Rome shining once again. The man who once banged his head against the wall, crying out for his missing legions, now breathed a sigh of relief. But the story does not end with celebrations. The legacies of Arminius, Tiberius, and Germanicus echo to this day. Want to know how they influenced the Roman Empire and the ancient world? Get ready for the conclusion. The legacy that echoes today. Even in defeat, Arminius remained active in Germania for a time, challenging Rome with guerrilla tactics. However, the cohesion of his coalition was no longer the same, and his former allies began turning against each other. He became a legendary figure among his people, the leader who dared to mortally wound an invincible empire, but ultimately paid a high price for the partial freedom of Germania. For Rome, the successful revenge did not mean the total recovery of the territories lost beyond the Rhine. Tiberius, as the new emperor, would focus more on consolidating secure borders than on risking deep conquests in hostile regions. Germanicus, for his part, continued to shine in other campaigns until his untimely death, carrying the weight of a future that many believed could have been even more glorious if he had survived and assumed imperial power. The greatest legacy of this story is a reminder that even a powerful empire is subject to falls. However, it is the way it rises that truly defines its greatness. Rome proved to be resilient, turning an initial tragedy into fuel to come back even stronger. And that teaches us about persistence, courage, and the notion that even the mightiest are not exempt from trials. We have reached the end of this fascinating journey into the past, where bravery, politics, and the thirst for revenge blend together to form one of the most striking narratives of antiquity. If you enjoyed this time travel journey and want more incredible stories like this, subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and share this video with your friends. That way, we can continue bringing historical adventures that inspire us and make us reflect on the strength and fragility of great empires. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video about ancient Rome.